Choosing what plant you want for your terrarium can be an intimidating process. There's like so many plants out there. There's like millions of different species, a whole bunch of different requirements. You just have no idea which one is going to be best for your particular situation and for your particular terrarium. So to help you out with that, I'm going to walk you through some of the terrariums that I've made, as well as give you some ideas on what kind of plants will work best for most terrariums. So let me give you a little disclaimer here. I have a few terrariums. Most of them have been created by gathering plants locally. I didn't go out and buy plants specifically just to add them to my terrarium, and went the natural route of going out and gathering plants in my area and kind of add them to my terrarium that way. I have a lot of moss and maybe a few pieces of grass, a few small plants that I picked up here and there, and one fern. I'm going to show you a few clips of what my terrariums look like. So let's go in the order that I put them together. So actually my first and third terrariums are placed in the same spot right next to the window. I thought that was kind of a good place to place them. It's like right next to a window. I have some blinders on so it's not getting like direct exposure to sunlight, but I think the reflection from the white pieces of plastic is giving it enough sunlight for them to grow. And it's been that way for about a month or two since we've moved into this townhouse. So the first terrarium that I made, I put that one back together. I'd say it's almost coming up on a year now. I really haven't done any maintenance on it at all. I think I've only opened it up once to add a little bit of water in there, but other than that, no maintenance at all. As a matter of fact, it actually fell over. My first and third terrariums, they actually fell over and some dirt got sprayed on the sides of the wall. But even after that, they seem to be doing fine. So in this first terrarium out here, you'll see there's some pieces of moss in there. I think I put a lot of moss in there, maybe a little bit more than I should have, but there's a lot of moss. I think most of them are still alive. There might be a few pieces here and there that kind of died off, look a little brown. I threw in a few blades of grass in there and a few random small plants that I just picked up. I have no idea what kind of plants those are, but I just added them into my terrarium and they seem to be growing and doing fine in that terrarium. So for the most part, I think my terrarium is doing pretty well. I also saw a couple earthworms in there. I have no idea how those got in there, but they seem to be doing fine as well. I see them pop out once in a while. And overall, I think this first terrarium is doing great, even though I really didn't do any maintenance on it at all. And it's made of a bunch of plants that I picked out randomly from my local area. Well, maybe not totally randomly, but just random pieces of moss and little plants that I found here and there. And you can actually see some of the moss start to actually sprout out. It almost looks like they're reaching out for sunlight, kind of like little vines growing out. I think that's pretty cool. I'm just gonna let it grow like that. I'm not really planning to prune it or anything, but that is what my first terrarium looks like right now. The second terrarium that I made, I put this one back together maybe a couple months after my first terrarium. So at the time of this video, it's August, and I put that terrarium together back in January of this year. You can actually view it in one of my older videos. It's like DIY terrarium for $28 or something like that. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to watch that one, of how I put that one together, in case you're wondering what my thought process was behind putting some of these plants in there, or how this terrarium was put together to begin with. So I have this also kind of right next to a window, but it's also behind a curtain, kind of a thin curtain that allows a lot of light through. I placed it really close to the window just because that curtain's there. It kind of absorbs a little bit of the light, so it's giving it indirect sunlight and not allowing the terrarium to get fully blasted by full sunlight. So this terrarium also seems to be doing, I would say, okay, I think. So the first thing that you might see standing out in this terrarium is a fern. So that's a fern that I picked out from a park somewhere. I got it when it was kind of small. I threw it in there, and that one seems to be doing pretty well. I saw that a lot of the fern branches are starting to grow out. I think the big one in the center is one that actually sprouted out on its own after being added to the terrarium. I saw a couple of branches kind of look leggy, looks pretty thin and starting to droop. I think that's fine. I've seen like maybe one or two branches sprout off here and there on that fern. The mosses, I think most of them have actually died off, and I'm kind of okay with that. But I am kind of happy that one of them seems to be doing fine. One small patch of really green moss in the dirt, I think that one's doing pretty well. The other ones seem to have died off. That's kind of totally normal, something that you'd expect in a terrarium. Sometimes things don't turn out as you would like, and some of your plants might die off, but that's totally okay. It's part of the experimentation process. This third terrarium out here is also relatively new. I put this one together a few months ago, I would say. That one also has a video associated with it. I'll also leave a link down in the description if you want to watch that one. And this one is probably my simplest terrarium. I really didn't do all that much. I put some soil in there and then added moss on top of that, and that was it. I didn't do anything special like a drainage layer or a separation layer or anything like that. So this one is also doing well, I think. It's the piece of moss that I added in there still looks green. It's covered by some dirt when it fell over one time. Even despite that, it still seems to be doing okay so far. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about what kind of plants you should add to your terrarium in case you're wondering what you want to look out for if you're adding plants to a terrarium of your own, or if you want to go out and buy plants that would specifically be well suited for a terrarium. So first one I would recommend, look out for mosses and ferns. Those are the staple terrarium plants because those are the type of plants that do well in a terrarium because they enjoy lots of humidity and moisture. So moss and ferns are really great at that, and they also tend to do well in indirect light conditions, which is pretty typical of a terrarium. And now I'm going to go ahead and list some other plants that I've seen pop up online a lot when I've been doing research on what type of plants do well in terrarium. So first up we have the Pokedot plant, and we also have the nerve plant. I think those are pretty common plants that you'll find in most gardening nurseries. You'll probably find those there. The third one that I see come up all the time is called a creeping fig, or Ficus pumila. Those type of plants are also super common. I've seen them every time I've gone into a gardening center like at Home Depot or something. Creeping figs like to grow really fast, so if you want something that'll fill up a lot of space in your terrarium, creeping figs are a great way to go. And they're also pretty easy to propagate. You can just buy one and then clip off pieces here and there and then just add them wherever you want to new terrariums or into your garden or something, and they'll spread like crazy. So some other plants that I've seen, I've also seen the aluminum plant come up, baby tears plant, peperomia, prayer plant, and the English ivy. And I'd say the general characteristic of these plants is that they do well in most conditions, they can tolerate indirect light, and they don't tend to grow too large. And so they're probably better suited to grow in a terrarium where the space is kind of confined. Sometimes I do see succulents pop up, but I would only recommend doing succulents if you're doing an open terrarium, which is kind of a whole different situation compared to a closed terrarium. So this whole video I've been talking about closed terrariums. If you're going to grow an open terrarium, it's kind of a different story. But if you do an open terrarium, succulents could work for those situations. Those are the type of plants that I would recommend for a terrarium. I would say moss and ferns are the staple plants that you want to look for. Keep a special eye out for those type of plants. And then you can also consider gathering plants locally, which I've done in one of my previous videos that you can check out in the description below. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, if you enjoyed it, learned something, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.